Brad Steckert is the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator from Washington and Waukesha counties, and he's going to tell us a little bit about some efforts with purple loosestrife.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Wanted to thank the Wisconsin First Detectors Network for having me on, and I'm happy to come down to Madison today to talk about purple loosestrife as a biological control. We're kind of going to focus on a case study today in Washington County. That's where I've worked for about 3 years, and this project has been implemented. It was one of the first things I started doing when I started in Washington County, and um, we're just going to kind of go from there. So we'll start off with identification of purple loosestrife. There's a couple key factors in identifying purple loosestrife, and there are also some plants that are easy to get it mixed up with. So we'll just kind of go over a few identification factors first, and then we'll kind of get into the case study of what we did in Washington County. So starting off, purple loosestrife is an herbaceous perennial. It can grow anywhere from 3 to 9 feet tall, and even a little bit shorter than that sometimes. It has woody, square, or hexagonal stems. So if you roll it in your fingers, and you can see in the bottom left picture there, if you were to roll that in your fingers, you would feel the sides kind of stopping. It wouldn't roll smoothly between your fingers. And it is in Natural Resources 40 restricted species. One thing as well is the stems towards the end of the season get very woody, and they are they can be kind of tough to break. Looking at the leaves of purple loosestrife, they're opposite, and they can occasionally be alternate, but most of the time they'll be opposite, as you can see in the picture of the left there. So they're straight across from each other on the stem. And when you look at the full plant, like the picture on the right, the pairs alternate at 90-degree angles. So on the square stem, you can see in the picture on the left that there are leaves coming off of the left side and the right side, but above and below that, the leaves will be coming off the front and the back of the stem there. And usually oftentimes they're at 90-degree angles with the stem as well. Leaves can be 1 to 4 inches long. They're lanceolate, which just means they're lance-shaped, and they have smooth edges most of the time. Sometimes they can have very, very small toothed edges, but most of the time they're smooth. And the leaves are also sessile, which means they're attached to the stem, and they don't have a petiole. Moving on to the flowers, the reason purple loosestrife is called purple loosestrife is because the flowers are purple. So they're magenta or purple. They have 5 to 6 petals, and the flowers are clustered in spikes at the tips of the stems. So you'll see the inflorescence all be at the tip of the flower, not where the leaves are growing. As the plant flowers, it's going to start flowering at the base of the spike of flowers and work its way up. So if you see a plant like the middle picture there, the flowers on the bottom of that spike are going to start dying off, and the flowers at the very tip of the spike have not started flowering yet. The seeds of purple loosestrife are very small. Almost I could compare it to like black pepper almost. They're just so small, and they're really tiny. And they grow in capsules that they usually burst mid to late summer. So they'll kind of grow into these capsules that will burst, and the seeds will get dispersed that way. The roots of purple loosestrife are very distinct. They're large woody root masses, and in the bottom picture here, you can see a pretty small root mass. They can get up to about 4 feet wide, so they get to be pretty big. And what happens is the new sprouts in the new year every spring will actually shoot out of the root mass and reproduce asexually. So you have sexual reproduction by flowering and dispersing seeds, and then you also have asexual reproduction by these new flowers shooting out of the roots, or new plants shooting out of the roots. And you can see in that picture in the bottom, there's a whitish plant sticking out of the root. The reason purple loosestrife is bad is because it presents an ecological problem. It was a ornamental introduced from Europe and Asia, and when it was introduced to America, there were no insects or diseases to keep it in check, and that really allowed the plant to reproduce without being held back at all. And it just kind of grew rampant and took over its favorite type of habitat, which happened to be wetlands. So it really likes wet soil and grows well in those conditions. As we stated earlier, it has very prolific seeds. One spike can produce hundreds of thousands of seeds, and so that's a lot of seeds. And as I stated earlier, also it sprouts from roots each year, so it has multiple kinds of reproduction. It often outcompetes native vegetation, and as it outcompetes native vegetation, it reduces diversity within wetlands. And the ecosystem function of wetlands to filter water and have water move through them gets greatly reduced because these root masses are really can grow to be really big, and they can actually start channelizing and start erosion within wetlands as well. Purple loosestrife was introduced in 1900, and it has spread throughout the state of Wisconsin since the 1980s. It is now in every county in Wisconsin. It's a little bit thicker towards a little bit west of Lake Winnebago and in southeast Wisconsin. You'll see more dense patches of purple loosestrife. But since its introduction, Wisconsin has teamed with other states and the federal government to support biocontrol research efforts. So the research efforts were started in the 1980s, and the control insects for biological control became available in 1994. Since 1994, when these insects were allowed to be released, we've seen pretty successful reduced purple loosestrife growth in wetlands all around the state. In Washington County, we chose to use biocontrol for many different reasons. One, we have a strong base of partners that, and this is when I came on to the job 3 years ago, they were kind of already going with this program. The 4-H groups were really doing a great job at growing these beetles, and I came in just to kind of put some power behind the program as well. But they're really into it. So we have 4-H families, we have universities, so we have UW-Washington County and Carroll College and Waukesha County. And then we have individual families that like to grow the purple loosestrife and grow the beetles themselves. And these families are just, people who want to kind of do something with their kids over the summer. They want to do a cool science-based volunteer project, and we like to reach out to them and have them join us as well and grow purple loosestrife beetles. And then we have nonprofit organizations like the Ozaki Washington Land Trust. They do a great job in rearing beetles and growing purple loosestrife and beetles on them to release throughout the summer as well. Another reason we use biocontrol in Washington County is because it's just proven to be useful on existing populations. There are what used to be fields of purple loosestrife in Washington County where you walk through them now and it looks like a fire came through the wetland area and just burned all of the purple loosestrife, but didn't burn anything else. And you see a lot of native vegetation coming back, and the wetland just seems to be a lot more healthy. The other thing about the program is once you get all your initial materials, it's pretty cheap and it is effective. And it is also self-sustaining because it's a biological control. You're growing the beetles, and the beetles will eat the plants as long as they're there. The beetles don't eat much of anything else besides the purple loosestrife, and that is something that was tested for many years before the beetles were released. So the program is 23 years old, and beetles have not been found to be eating much more than purple loosestrife. So going over a timeline of kind of what happens with the biological control project, this is a really nice diagram that Krista Kampke from Golden Sands RC&D put together. And it kind of just lays everything out in what we're doing during different parts of the year. So in February to March, up to basically this weekend, we're just planning the project out, making sure we're getting enough partners and interest with the project, and then we can kind of gauge how many beetles we're going to be able to grow and how many plants we're going to need and what we're going to end up with. So we'll kind of look at what we want our end results to be and plan around that. In April, and that is this weekend in Waukesha County. We'll be doing the spring dig. So we'll be going out with Carroll College, and then on May 13th we'll be going out with 4-H to do a big dig. So we have two areas where we're designated. We know that there's a lot of purple loosestrife growing there, and we'll go to the old vegetation. We'll find the old plants, and we'll actually dig up a lot of the roots. The roots have little shoots growing off of them, and I'll have some pictures of that in a little bit. In mid-May to early to late May, and sometimes even into early June, we'll be going out in the field and collecting tons of beetles. We'll try and get, I think last year we tried to collect about 5,000 beetles. And we do all of that by hand. And we also partner with the DNR, and they help us with collecting beetles as well. In May, and then we'll add those beetles to the purple loosestrife that we're growing. So then in May to June, we'll just watch and maintain the purple loosestrife, make sure we're trying to keep it healthy, even though it's invasive. It will be contained in pools, and so, but we'll be watering it periodically and making sure that it's maintained. And then late June to early July, we'll take the purple loosestrife that we're growing on site and release it into wetlands where the purple loosestrife is growing in the wild. In Washington County, so we've had some successful continuous implementation of the purple loosestrife biocontrol. You can see on this map from 2013 to last year, 2016. This is where we've actually released beetles. You can see there's kind of a pattern where purple loosestrife has grown through the county, and it kind of follows where our lakes are. So we see a lot of purple loosestrife on shoreline and in right-of-ways near lakes. This, as I stated earlier, it wouldn't be successful without really strong partnerships between the DNR, the county. 4-H leaders have done a ton of work and volunteered a lot of hours to this program, and then also nonprofits like the Ozaki Washington Land Trust, and also just strong community involvement. Last year it was pretty successful. We released about 550,000 beetles, which was pretty awesome. So just kind of going through the program and what we did in the past couple of years, we'll just go through the process, kind of just as a case study. So step one is just to collect the rootstock and soil. And here we actually have a site at an old post office. People at the post office really kind of wonder what we're doing sometimes when we're out there chopping at the ground with axes and pickaxes. But what we're doing is we're collecting this rootstock. And you can see in the two pictures on the right that there's a root mass there, and you can see the green vegetation kind of already starting to grow up. We'll cut the roots out and store them in these pools. And these pools are going to act as their new home wetlands for a little while. One thing to mention is that whenever we do this, it does create a lot of it does disturb the area quite a bit, because we're kind of digging into the ground and axing into the ground. So what we make sure to do, and Jason mentioned this as well with the Phragmites control, is we always want to make sure that we replace the disturbed area with native seeds. That way we don't give the purple loosestrife more real estate to grow. One thing to make sure to do, I have to say this as an AIS coordinator, is to clean off your equipment when you're done. You're digging in soil that is full of purple loosestrife seeds, so you don't want to forget to scrape all the mud, dirt, and debris off of your equipment and your boots. And a lot of the times you're not going to have really nice dry conditions like this where purple loosestrife is growing, but you're going to have to put waders on or big mud boots on and be in a pretty muddy situation. So you want to make sure to clean off your waders, your boots, and equipment. And I always, spray with a bleach solution. And if you have access to a pressure washer or steam, to use that. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to keep your plants in their new homes, their new wetlands, which are their pools, until they're ready to plant. So here you can just see these are all the roots we collected last year. There's a lot of plants there. I think there's about 500-ish plants. And we just kind of keep them moist, keep them wet, make sure that they're in the pool. They're pretty much going to grow in a lot of different conditions. So as long as they're fairly wet in those pools, they'll be good to go for a week while you're waiting for your planting day. Um, and as you can see on the picture on the right, Washington County 4-H, they donated a lot of equipment, and some landscaping companies like David J. Frank, we just asked them, we told them about the project and said, hey, can you donate any equipment? And they said, oh yeah, we have all these old pots that come with the trees and shrubs that we get that we don't use. We kind of just throw the pots out. So they have this big parking lot full of pots that we used. You might see on the picture with all the pots in it, there are little washers in each of the buckets, in each of the pots. Those washers all have a number etched in them, so we know what families are taking what pots, and we can kind of keep track of who has what and what pots get released where, and then we know where to go collect them. That's all up in the top left picture. That's all the soil that David J. Frank donated. I think they may have donated it to 4-H, who paid a very small fee for it, and then 4-H kind of donated it to the program. It's nice to use treated soil because you know that there's no invasives in it, so that's kind of why we wanted to use the treated and bagged soil. But yeah, so the next thing we did was we just host a Purple Loosestrife planting day. So we had 4-H kids come, and we just did this right at Fair Park in Washington County. We set up all of the pots that families were able to kind of go and put soil in about halfway up, and then they would cut up the purple loosestrife roots and put them in the pots, and some of the kids would put them in upside down, but it didn't matter because purple loosestrife will still grow in that situation. And then they'll go around and kind of fill the pots up about 3/4 full. And it's just it's a fun event. Families get to get out and learn about purple loosestrife, and we end up sending them all home with these pots full of purple loosestrife, and they each get a pool. Families will take anywhere from one pool with 5 pots in it to 3 or 4 pools, so 15 or 20 pots. So while they're doing all of this work, so they're gonna take their pots home and grow them, and in the meantime, we're gonna be monitoring existing populations of purple loosestrife for beetles. There's some volunteers here, Norb Yogerst and Ken Hebby, Lee Kruger, all are out all the time looking for beetles. They get really excited when the beetles come out, and I always get a call on the first day one of them sees a beetle. And once the beetles are out, we start collecting. So we want to collect 10 beetles for each pot of purple loosestrife that's going to be grown. And so we just collect until we have as many beetles as we can get. Once we have all the beetles, 4-H volunteers, they will actually take 10 beetles. So we'll keep the beetles in big nets, and they'll actually take 10 beetles and use an aspirator to put 10 beetles into each of these little baggies, and then we'll put leaves in the baggies for the beetles to eat while we're distributing these little bags of beetles to 4-H families. So this is what your average 4-H yard will look like, or this is actually taken at Ozaukee Washington Land Trust. So they'll put two spikes in the ground and kind of put a string across the spikes, and the purple loosestrife, they'll grow it up in the pots, and sometimes they won't put the cages or the netting on right away, but eventually, especially when you put the beetles in, you need to put the netting onto the cages, which you can see in the picture on the right. The netting is just secured with a bungee cord around the bottom of the pot, and the cage is just tied to the string that's going across the spikes there. So you're going to grow your purple loosestrife plants and put the beetles on them, and the beetles are just going to eat away at the purple loosestrife. And these pictures kind of show the beetle damage, so you'll eventually see your purple loosestrife plants looking really burned, and they'll look like there's just a lot of insect damage to them. So once you see that the beetles really have no more food because they've eaten away their food source, they're ready to release. And that's usually going to be the end of June, mid to end of June, or early July. So you're going to usually we'll have planned out where we're going to release the beetles, and so we'll have purple loosestrife patches kind of mapped out where we know that it's growing very rampantly, and we'll kind of have gauged where the purple loosestrife is going to be. So for 4-H families, we can either tell them where to go put their purple loosestrife pots, or we'll go with them to show them how to do it. In this case, we were in kind of a swampy area with purple loosestrife, but you want to, whenever you're putting the purple loosestrife beetles out into a wetland, you want to make sure to intertwine the dead potted purple loosestrife with the live wild purple loosestrife. And this is so any larva that is growing in the soil of the pot can kind of crawl across the stems of the dead purple loosestrife onto the live purple loosestrife and keep eating. And so the result is hopefully after 2 to 5 years, large patches of purple loosestrife will be reduced in density and size. So Galluricella beetles, some things to keep in mind are that the Galluricella beetles that you're releasing, they do not eliminate populations of purple loosestrife. They reduce plant population strength, and but purple loosestrife will likely remain on a site, but it'll just remain in a reduced state. So as you can see on the picture on the left, that wetland was very taken over by purple loosestrife, and after I think it was 3 years, you can see a lot of goldenrod has come back and some other native plants have come back, but there still are a few patches of purple loosestrife in there. You can see some purple in there yet. Sometimes as the beetles eat the purple loosestrife, they'll kind of eat themselves out of a food source, and you could see it coming back after a couple of years of having no beetles left. So sometimes the beetle populations will need to be reconstituted. And the goal is to kind of get some native competition. So you want some native plants and giving the purple loosestrife that is still there competition. Usually the beetles will make the purple loosestrife populations pretty weak, and so the native populations of plants can have a chance to come back. And once again, this is just where we've released purple loosestrife in Washington County. And I didn't mention the other methods of control for purple loosestrife. There are chemical and mechanical methods of control that are pretty easy, and then there's also biocontrol. And so I didn't go into those treatments at all because I didn't think I would have time. But obviously, all treatments combined is going to be the best way to control a population of purple loosestrife. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.